Hi everybody, and welcome to Theoral's Complete Guide to Marvel Champions, Heroes A to Z. I'm Theoral, and I'll be your host through this series of videos where we look at each of the heroes of Marvel Champions, considering their rich lore, their strategic gameplay, and their various deck building options, in order that you can better understand who these heroes are, where they come from, how to play them, and get more enjoyment out of your time with Marvel Champions. Today we're going to talk about the astonishing Ant-Man, the size-changing hero who talks to ants. Various individuals have worn the Ant-Man suit over the years. Hank Pym was the first one, and then Scott Lang and Eric O'Grady. He's been in the comics, of course, and made the jump to cartoons as well as to video games and even a trilogy of movies. Currently in the MCU, as well as in this game and in the comics, the man behind the mask is Scott Lang. So let's talk about Scott Lang. Who is he? Where does he come from? And as we look over his comic history, then we'll talk about some of the thematics of his cards, the mechanics, and then look over some decks. So, back in 1962, in Tales to Astonish number 27, Hank Pym first put on the Ant-Man suit when he was fighting some communists or something. He was a founding Avenger, along with his girlfriend at the time, Janet Van Dyne, who I thought I had up here. And they later got married, and Hank Pym took off the Ant-Man suit, became Yellow Jacket. And in Avengers number 181, along comes Scott Lang, an electronics expert, an ex-burglar, and a father who needed desperately to save his daughter's surgeon from the evil Darren Cross, who is not the Yellow Jacket at the time. He was just some rich dude who had heart problems and kidnapped a surgeon. So Scott Lang snuck into Hank Pym's place and stole the Ant-Man suit and went in and rescued Cassie's surgeon in order that his daughter Cassie could have the heart surgery she needed and live. After doing so, knowing that he had done wrong, he turned himself into the authorities and went to prison. But Hank Pym, in what I would say is a fairly unusual, magnanimous attitude, said, "You know what? I'm not using the Ant-Man suit. Why don't you use it?" And so, rather than becoming a villain who, steals superpowers in order to save his daughter, Scott Lang became a hero, known as the Ant-Man. He joined up with Tony Stark, did some kind of freelance work there, ended up working with the Avengers a lot, fought Taskmaster, went to Microworld, met some of the Fantastic Four, including The Thing, and then when the Masters of Evil came and attacked, he was able to help out the Avengers, and him and Wasp took out Titania and Absorbing Man while the Avengers were fighting there. He also met up with Spider-Man, had a team up with him, shrunk him down to a tiny size. Shenanigans. But overall, he was just kind of an occasional character in all of these comics, until he finally got a regular spot on the Fantastic Four, because Reed Richards had disappeared, presumed dead, although nobody believed he was dead, so I don't know how much you could say he was really presumed dead. But anyways, the Fantastic Four sought out Scott Lang for his electronics expertise, but very quickly he revealed that he was the Ant-Man. And so they had a bunch of adventures as they went through various worlds, searching for Reed Richards, dealing with Johnny's Skrull girlfriend's egg that she had, and, interacting with the TVA, an evil Sue Storm, Inhumans, all manner of things, until eventually they found Doom. And since Reed Richards was presumed dead, having fought Doom, they knew that Reed Richards couldn't be far behind. And indeed, they soon found Reed Richards. He returned him to the Fantastic Four, and Ant-Man went off to do other things. In particular, at this time, Onslaught happened, which is where Magneto merged with Professor Xavier. Ant-Man really didn't have anything to do with that story, but it killed a whole bunch of heroes. Well, it didn't actually kill them, but they were presumed dead. And there were no Avengers and nobody around. And so when Loki showed up, Ant-Man and War Machine and not Thor, but Thunderstrike and She-Hulk all showed up to fight him. And Loki said, "What's going on? This is like the founding Avengers all over again." So he just kind of left. And then Ant-Man's like, "Hey, you guys want to form Avengers?" And they said, "Nope." So he went off and joined the Heroes for Hire. Joined up with Iron Fist and Luke Cage, Jim Hammond, the original Human Torch, not pictured here, but also She-Hulk, Hercules, all of these guys. They were part of the Heroes for Hire. And they fought a dude named Eshu, the Master of the World, and Exodus and the Acolytes also, as well as some other folks as they went along. But eventually, after managing to take down the Master of the World, the Heroes for Hire was acquired by Namor, the Submariner, and some other people, and they felt like ex-cons weren't the best, most fitting face for the Heroes for Hire, so they fired Luke Cage and Ant-Man, and everybody else was like, "Yeah, peace, we're not sticking around." So the Heroes for Hire ended. They parted on friendly terms. Everybody got along, but they had to go find other things to do. So Ant-Man went back to taking care of his daughter and dated Jessica Jones for a bit, until finally he went back to the Avengers, and at some point while they were visiting Avengers Mansion, he lost custody of his daughter because her mother was not okay with Cassie hanging out at Avengers Mansion and being put in extreme danger. So he ended up as so he decided to enroll full time on the Avengers at a time when the roster was super deep. We got Jack of Hearts here, who is not a card, but is important enough to this story that he gets to be represented by something. And along with all of these other heroes, and probably more that we don't have cards for. But mostly he had a lot of interactions with Jack of Hearts. They kind of had a friction-y relationship where they would, argue and fight. But he visited Yellow Jacket Hank Pym while he was in jail at some point in this process. They fought a rampaging She-Hulk. They fought Del Rusk, who turned out to be actually Red Skull in disguise, and he brought the Red Zone and some of these things you may have seen in Earth's Mightiest Heroes if you ever watched that cartoon. But after fighting with the Avengers for a little while, Cassie, in spite of having been taken away from Scott in order to preserve her safety, ended up in a lot of trouble, and she was kidnapped by a serial killer dude who killed little girls or something. And anyways, Ant-Man went and he saved her, and then took the guy's gun and pointed at him and was like, "I'm tired of my daughter being abducted." But then along comes Jack of Hearts, and he's like, "Dude, we don't kill people, or you shouldn't kill people." And anyways, he had been having troubles with his powers, and he was exploding and was having to spend time in the null room. But since his powers were going on the fritz, he grabs the dude that kidnapped Cassie, flies to outer space, and explodes. Ignore that. He explodes. And so he is dead. And Scott's like, "Wow, he kept me from killing that guy in front of my daughter. That's probably good. I shouldn't kill people in front of my daughter. It's not a very heroic thing to do." Although Jack killed the guy. So the whole moral side of that, I'm not 100% clear on. Anyways, Scott's like, "Well, Jack and I didn't get along really, but he was a good guy after all." And then, a week later, the dead Jack of Hearts was wandering around the Avengers Mansion area, and he was acting kind of crazy, so Scott Lang went out to check on him, and then he exploded, and Scott Lang died. That was because of the Scarlet Witch having reanimated his corpse. And then she broke apart the Avengers, and so the Avengers were now disassembled. and Scott Lang was dead. So he died, and he stayed dead for like 12 years, which, stayed dead for 12 years is a weird sentence, but hey, it's comics. Dead for 12 years, that's not bad. Or maybe it is bad. I don't know. It depends on how you look at it. It's not a bad death record. Anyways, after this whole Scarlet Witch scenario, though, the Avengers disbanded. They were like, hey, look, we got it. Too many people died in that. Hawkeye died in particular. Other characters were dead. Vision had been torn apart by She-Hulk. Crazy things. Crazy. But when the Avengers... with the Avengers gone, somebody had to take their place. So Iron Lad, Kang from the future, Nathaniel Richards comes back in time, doesn't want to become Kang, decides to recruit some Avengers to help him out, and finds various young people related to the current Avengers, such as Stinger, or not Stinger, Cassie Lang, who is Stature at the time, and Billy Kaplan, Hulkling, who's not pictured here because we don't have his card, Kate Bishop, Patriot, not this Patriot, Eli Bradley Patriot, and he recruits all of them, ends up that his armor becomes a copy of the Vision, and they are the Young Avengers, and they hang out for a bit as kind of a young group of Avengers. The other Avengers are like, hey, your kids are too young, you shouldn't be doing this. It's worth noting that Cassie was like 13 or 14 years old at the time, so they are pretty young. I say as I look at my 15-year-old daughter and think, wow, yeah, 13 was young. However I may have felt about it at the time. But anyways, they hang out, they do some stuff, and eventually Tommy becomes part of the group. Billy becomes Wiccan. Tommy says, I'm going to be Speed. Patriot, Eli Bradley actually gets super soldier powers. And with Billy and Tommy, they eventually say, I think we're the missing daughters of Scarlet Witch for reasons. And so they decide to look for Scarlet Witch. And they find her being held by Doom. So she'd lost her memory, and Doom was trying to marry her. And he didn't like it when they came and tried to get her away. And then they successfully took her back in time to restore her memory, to make her remember who she was. As they went back in time, one of the places they visited was when Ant-Man was going to be exploded. And so they grabbed him and pulled him out of there and brought him back to the present day. And so Ant-Man was no longer dead. Unfortunately, they ended up fighting Dr. Doom, and Cassie died. So that was not a very long reunion for Scott and his daughter. Scott was, upset about this and not happy with Doom and kind of wanted to get revenge on him. But when the Fantastic Four called and asked for some help, he decided to go ahead and step up. So Ant-Man and She-Hulk, Medusa, and Darla Deering were supposed to stand in for the Fantastic Four for about 4 minutes while they went off and did something. Of course, something went wrong, and as it always does. So they ended up having to actually take over as the Fantastic Four for a period of time. Darla Deering put on the Thing suit that he wore and became Miss Thing, while the rest of them sort of played their roles as the Bruiser and the person that can reach around things and the person that can disappear. And so they were the Fantastic Four. For a time, they ended up dealing with a Johnny Storm that was from the future, from an alternate reality, and was old man Human Torch. But other than that, they really didn't interact with the Fantastic Four at all because they were off on some other dimension doing their stuff. However, they did get to fight Dr. Doom. And so Ant-Man got to have his revenge by beating up Dr. Doom and deciding not to kill him because, that's what heroes do. They don't kill people, I guess, unless you're Jack of Hearts and want to take people out to outer space. But if they're supervillains, I guess you don't kill them. Anyways, he beat up Dr. Doom and was finally all right with all of that. So then there's this whole original sin story where Nick Fury kills the Watcher. Not this Nick Fury, old white man Nick Fury. Kills the Watcher, and they end up trying to figure out what happened or who done it. Anyways, he hangs out with some heroes for that and does some things. But after that, there's a storyline that happens called Axis, where everybody gets inverted, or something. Not everybody, but a good number of people. One of those people is Doom. And when Doom is inverted and realizes he wants to do good, he thinks, what's the worst thing I've done that I could undo? I know, I'll bring back Cassie Lang. So he brings Cassie Lang back to life. She no longer has superpowers at this time. So she's not able to come back to being Stature, as she was before in the Young Avengers, and she's kind of frustrated by that, but Scott's so happy to have her back. He's like, I'm going to get my life together, and he goes and gets a job with Tony Stark. And then Cassie and her mother move to Miami, Florida. And Scott says, well, I'm not staying here. So he leaves New York and also goes to Miami, Florida, and starts a security team. A security force. I don't know what you want to call it. He does security for people and sets up security systems. So he's doing that. Meanwhile, the power broker's hanging around, who we don't have, and he's doing bad stuff, and he ends up getting Cassie, and she's kidnapped by Darren Cross. Well, not kidnapped exactly. She goes to Darren Cross to get powers, and then wants to take her heart again. He works with some various ex-cons, Grizzly, who we don't have, Machine Smith, not to be confused with Machine Man, who we do have a card for, and Beetle, who he ends up having a on-again, off-again fling with, Darla Deering from the Fantastic Four, Raz Malhotra, who he gifts the Giant Man suit to, and they hang out along with some others, and he recruits 11 criminals to go help him to break into Darren Cross's facilities in order that he can save his daughter Cassie, who's been kidnapped by him. And they get in, and they get Cassie, and they get out, but Darla Deering is doing a film thing. And so, anyways, the whole thing's recorded, and Scott ends up in trouble and ends up having to go to jail again. But at the trial, She-Hulk comes to be his legal defense. I guess I should have her in that form. Jennifer Walters is his legal defense. Beetle, in her other guise, is prosecuting him, and his ex-wife shows up and gives a compelling testimony, and he's let off the hook. So that's great. Just in time for Captain America to turn into Captain Hydra and take over the world and be really bad in the Secret Empire. Ant-Man ends up joining up with Underground, led by Hawkeye, with a bunch of other heroes, including the AI of Tony Stark, who is currently dead. And unfortunately, he's not really there to help them out as much as spy on them, because Captain America has kidnapped his daughter Cassie. So, poor Cassie. She's just can't catch a break. But anyways, Ant-Man ends up being a mole for them and ratting him out. He feels really bad about it. He has to confess because he feels so bad about it, much like how he had to confess to burgling the Ant-Man suit before. It's just part of who Scott Lang is. Has to fess up to when he does wrong. So yeah, he admits doing wrong. They manage to bring Captain America back, and Ant-Man feels so ashamed that he decides to go off into space and join the Guardians of the Galaxy. And so Ant-Man is a Guardian of the Galaxy for about a minute while they look for Infinity Stones. He hangs out with Nova Corps and with all these Guardian dudes. But after being there for a little while, he decides that he really needs to get home in order to make it to Cassie's birthday. So he contacts Nadia, because Nadia can get him home. And Nadia attempts to get him home, but in the process, they end up, both of them, stuck in the microverse, and effectively what is the quantum realm in the comics, and they're quantum entangled with one another, have all kinds of problems, but eventually, finally, they make it back. and just in time for Gamora to have gotten a hold of all of the stones and turn evil and collapse the universe into itself and all of that stuff. And in that process, Ant-Man does end up being part of the team, recruited by the White Queen, or Emma Frost and Loki, in order to help out and save everybody. So that's cool. If you want to know more about that, you can check out my Adam Warlock video, because he features, I don't know, it's a more prominent story for him. Ant-Man just is kind of there. But, I mean, he is there, unlike several heroes who don't even show up or only show up combined with other people. But after that's over, finally, he heads back to Miami and teams up with his daughter, Cassie Lang, who is now the superhero Stinger, and they fight some bad guys. He recently had the 60th anniversary of Ant-Man's creation, since 2022 has just passed, and within that, he ends up having some adventures with other Ant-Men, including Hank Pym, and they have some cool time-traveling adventures. And that's the last thing I think that Scott Lang appeared in, that Ant-Man has been in, but, you know, he's around, presumably fighting crime with his dear daughter. So that is the story of Ant-Man. All right, so let's talk about Ant-Man. So his powers, as mentioned, he can grow, he can shrink, he can talk to ants. That's pretty much what Ant-Man does. So there's not, unlike, say, Adam Warlock, who has all these crazy powers, Ant-Man's is pretty straightforward. He can grow to giant size, he can go tiny size, he can be normal sized man. And he's a burglar, and you would think a burglar that can shrink, like someone who's so skilled at sneaking around already that he can break into Hank Pym's place and steal the Ant-Man suit, then can learn to shrink to a tiny size. He would be amazing at infiltration. But really, from what I can tell, he feels like he didn't really learn how to do infiltration. Like, he knew how to burgle people, I guess, but he didn't really know what to do once he could sneak down to tiny size. Or maybe writers didn't really know what to do with him once he could shrink down to tiny size. So really, mostly he just, you know, fights people with ants and goes giant sometimes. But anyways, that's pretty much the character. So he's a civilian, which I know some people would prefer that he was like a thief, like Gambit, but, well, that's not what he is. He's just a civilian. But, you know, I think that is fitting because he's not really a thief. He doesn't burgle people anymore. He got in trouble for that. He got arrested for it. Every time he does it, things go bad. So really, he doesn't do it. He tries to kind of steer clear of that. So, civilian. He can go tiny. He can go giant. 3-sided card. Flips out, which is really cool from just a physical perspective. He can thwart when he's tiny because I guess he can sneak around. He can hit hard when he's big because that's what he does. All in all, pretty fitting. When he's giant, he also gets that 4 hand size because he's got that 3 attack, and that's just how it goes. He gets these little pings of removing a threat, dealing damage, or healing, which, I don't know. It's just a thing that he can do. I don't feel like it's necessarily thematic. It's like, surprise, I'm huge, so that, I guess, lets him ping somebody for damage. I don't know. He has Nadja Van Dyne as the Wasp, as his ally, which, you know, they did have Ant-Man and the Wasp comics, the one where they went to the microverse, and that's like the extent of their team-ups, really. But, you know, they might have more team-ups in the future, and it could be a very fitting ally for him. She is the Wasp currently in the comics, although Janet's still around, and she's still the Wasp in the comics also. They just are, you know, around doing stuff. She's a champion, but she's also an Avenger. She's been an Avenger while she's been part of the team. She responds to your form because that's the way that things go. Giant stop, giant attack, pounds one guy really hard, and then just kind of shockwaves everybody else. That seems like a fitting ability. He's got Hive Mind, which lets him use his ants to thwart, which is cool. There's only one copy of it, which makes it really inconsistent. You can't often use your ants for thwarting. That seems fine too, really. He can resize to let him switch from tiny to giant really quickly. And I don't think that's a thing that Ant-Man really does like a ton. It's not like he's tiny and then giant and then tiny, all that common. That's why I think this is from the movie instead of the comics. It's the comic book of the movie that this card is taken from. Pym particles, because he uses Pym particles to shrink and grow. And we'll come back to that in just a sec. So Pym particles, we'll do now. So when he's in giant form and you spend it, you heal. When you're in tiny form, you draw a card. That's also what his helmet does, which I think is interesting, that his helmet is Pym particles. Because, to me, thematically, this is a really weird situation where the Pym particles and the helmet have the same effect. Like, the helmet lets him talk to ants. It's like what the helmet does. In the comics, you don't need the helmet to breathe like they do in the movies. They can, like, I think in the very first comic where Hank Pym shrinks down to tiny size using Pym particles, he's just tiny. He doesn't even have a helmet. He ends up in an anthill and has to figure out how to survive. That's why he builds the helmet, so that he can talk to ants, because he's like, well, this would be useful. It would be useful to be able to talk to ants when I'm their size. That's what it does. It talks to ants. It doesn't have any interaction with ants. I find that thematically odd. That's a good card, though. So, Army of Ants lets him deal little bits of damage. That's totally reasonable. Once he gets 3 of these out, though, it's ridiculous how much damage those ants do. It does feel, like I said, it's thematic that they're there and they're doing stuff. It's crazy when you get 3 armies of ants. So giant strength lets him grow. When he grows giant, it increases his attack, makes him hit even harder. When he flips to giant form. And then wrist gauntlets, which wrist gauntlets might seem unthematic for him because, I mean, really, it's not like he uses them very much, but he does have wrist gauntlets in the comics. It's like a thing that he got. So stunning and confusing is pretty reasonable for what they do. Mostly his kit, I think the thematics of his kit is you're flipping and changing size. And it feels like you're changing size, and that's cool. The rest of it, ants doing little ping damage. Ants and Hive Mind feel like they're fairly thematic. The rest of it, or Giant Stomp too. But I don't know. It's just, it's there. I mean, he's got a pretty simple set of stuff that he does, so I don't think it's like unthematic. It's just there's not much there to work with. Pym particles having their weird effect. That's just, I don't know, it's cool, it's useful. And then Ant-Man's helmet replicating that effect is odd to me. But other than that, seems fine. Mechanically, strategically, if we're going to look at how Ant-Man performs pretty well. He is up there in the, I think, high tier or upper mid tier, somewhere in that range, is where he sits. Sometimes I've had bad games with him. If you get his helmet out, you're good. And these days, getting his helmet out is not as hard as it used to be. But he does kind of sometimes run into problems trying to do that, because once you have his helmet out, you heal every time you go to giant form. You draw cards when you go to tiny form. That means, firstly, if you're in giant form, you've got really a 5-card hand size, which is important. And if you can flip back and forth between tiny and giant form, then you can heal quite a bit, especially with Pym particles also, if you end up using them for their healing effect rather than their drawing effect. Plus, you can just go alter ego and heal a damage immediately, which is very nice to be able to do. You can't just go alter ego and then flip back to hero mode like Angel can, because resize only works from hero to hero. But it's still useful to be able to flip to alter ego, heal 1, flip back to hero, and recover. It's like having a full recovery. Being able to Pym particles in Ant-Man's helmet means you've got a lot of survivability once Ant-Man's helmet's down. Once his ants are down, he does quite a lot of damage. It's very easy to deal with any kind of minions that come up. His main weakness is thwarting, and his tiny form is very good for thwarting. You've got effectively 3 thwart that you can split. It's very strong, but it can be tough sometimes to manage with just Hive Mind as your only thwarting event. And that's most of the areas that I've had trouble with Ant-Man, is when I kind of get stuck in giant form with my forehand size, and like going to tiny form is tough because I'm low on health and I kind of need to defend or go to alter ego, but I really need to thwart before I can go to alter ego, and I don't have any thwarting events. There's thwarting in giant form is impossible unless you're running justice or something that can thwart, and it can be tough because if you don't have quite what you need. So that's the only times I've run into trouble with him. Mostly he just works. Mostly you're flipping from form to form, dealing damage, drawing cards, healing damage, removing threat, playing multiple resizes a turn. This lets you draw more cards. It's just play more resizes, using your ants to ping off all of the toughs and all of the little points of damage that you need so that you always have exactly what you need. And then you just giant stomp the villain. After stunning and confusing him, if you feel like it, this is oftentimes not even necessary, which is ridiculous that you don't even need the statuses. To be fair, this is very good, and it's very nice to be able to stun and confuse, but if you don't kind of carefully build your deck, oftentimes it can be very difficult to pull off this because of the need for double resources. It's a little harder than you think when you've only got, especially when you've only got a 4-card hand size. Happening to have 2 resources of that type in your hand that you can just spend on that without having any other issues it's an ask. It's not free. That's all I'm saying. It's not free. It's fair. I would say it's fairly priced. The stun and confuse on his gauntlets. So good hero, able to do quite a lot. In terms of deck building for him, he has pretty good stats. So readies are very good for him. You can very much build into his strength, especially with giant strength. It's very easy to get him up to. You can get up to 5 attack in kit. 7 if you can start giant form, go tiny, resize to giant, resize tiny and resize back to giant. No, start tiny, okay, flip to giant, resize down, resize back up. That's twice you flipped. This works every time you change, doesn't exhaust or anything. So you can get up to 7 attack with that, which is crazy levels of damage. All right, let's look at some decks. So, I forgot to hide this. I forgot to hide this. I meant to. Hide, top menu, apply. There, I hid it. For the end of this video. I'll try and remember to do that earlier next time. All right. Justice. So this is a Justice deck that I put together for him. Ant-Man, with him floating like a butterfly. So the idea here is that with Wrist Gauntlets, you have pretty good access to Confuse. So if we stack in a little bit more Confuse, such as with Sonic Rifle and Dazzler, then Float Like a Butterfly can do a lot of work. So he already likes basic attacking. Float Like a Butterfly works with that. It also works with Giant Stomp. Note that if you have a confused enemy and you play Giant Stomp and it deals 1 damage to them, that becomes 2. So that's pretty nice. If you're using Eros and confusing some minions, then Giant Stomp can kill people if you've got Float Like a Butterfly out. Other than that, just some nice efficient thwarting events, a bit of resources because he does like having some extra resources around. Super Power Training lets us get that helmet out, which is super cool for him to have. Heroic Intuition lets him take advantage of his 2 thwart, turning it into 3. Under Surveillance is just a good card, especially if you're playing at low player counts, solo or 2-player. And Skilled Investigator, because we've got a couple of side schemes here that we can clear, plus, you know, whatever we can manage with clear the area. We didn't go one way or another here because, you know, I'm going to run one way or another in a lot of people. Ant-Man doesn't super strongly need it. We also have Build Support, which can help us get out some of these support cards. Alternatively, it can also get ants, because those are all supports. So if we, you know, manage to get out a Queen Carrier on our own, then we can use Build Support to pull out some ants. I went with so the confuses, and then a couple of thematic allies, and Spider-Woman works with the confuses. So that's the idea there. And that is pretty much the Justice deck. So, aggression. So when doing Ant-Man aggression, we want to build up his base attack and then hit a bunch of times with extra readies. So that's kind of the idea here. We're using Earth's Mightiest Heroes with Blade and Hulk and Spider-Girl, Wasp, all super cheap allies, nice to get out to Earth's Mightiest Hero, ready for them. And then we have Ready to Rumble, so that if we can, be giant form, punch, flip back to tiny form, stand up, flip back to giant form, punch again. Fluid motion with cheap events and combat training, you can just push his attack super high, super high. Consider that if you have 2 giant strengths out, 2 fluid motions, combat training, you play a couple of attack events, which are all super cheap, and you could have up to 9 attack. Swarm Tactics, of course, nice ready. Note that Swarm Tactics can trigger off of Wasp, Janet Van Dyne, or Wasp, his ally. Everybody's an Avenger. Just good times, flipping around, bunching people is kind of the idea here. Leadership Ant-Man. Leadership Ant-Man is kind of built around the idea that giant, he hangs out with other ant people, and so it's kind of thematically throwing in Giant Man and Ant-Man, Goliath, because he fits in that group, even though he's not actually. I don't think Ant-Man is. Goliath's been gone for a while, at least original Goliath. I think both Goliaths. I'm not quite sure. But Scott Lang Ant-Man hasn't really hung out with Goliath, to my knowledge. And then Power Man, because he's got a similar usefulness in terms of being able to boost his attack really high for a turn or for the phase. So we've got some people that can hit high attack for a single phase. We've got Giant Man, Ant-Man, and then Stinger, because you got to have his daughter in here. And to go along with those, we've got Mighty Avengers to build up their value, team training, give them extra attack, rapid response, command teams for lots of readies so that we can use Goliath and Power Man to good effect. Got some resources, some healing, and then some side schemes, again with the build support and superpower training, because we've got some really nice supports that we can play with build support. Pretty much whenever you can get it out and get it thwarted. Note that these are very easy in solo for him to thwart, because Ant-Man can just, if he goes tiny, removes a threat, thwarts, removes 2 threat, they're done. As long as you have this main scheme under control, side schemes are super easy for him to push out. Of course, if you're playing multiplayer, that's not going to be as true, and you're going to need some help from probably the other players, but they get value out of it, so maybe they're willing. Anyways, let's just get good supports out. Let's get his helmet out, and let's just get out some of these expensive allies for free. So that's the idea. We play these allies, we ready them a bunch, we heal them up, keep out a full team of super strong, powerful allies, and hit hard with lots of resources to help us out, because we're playing leadership. All right, finally, protection. So Ant-Man protection. Again, we're going to lean into the readying a bit with repurpose and what doesn't kill me. But we're also kind of leaning into his healing. So with what doesn't kill me plus Pym particles plus helmet, you can get a lot of healing done. We've got a Ready to Rumble just so we can get extra uses out of our repurposed stats. It's not quite as heavy on the readies as the aggression deck, but it's kind of built to do a little bit of repurpose, some extra stunning, some extra tough statuses, a lot of control. The idea being that Ant-Man can defend, and you could build a defense deck with him. This is not a defense deck. This is a deck which hopes to just use tough statuses, stun statuses, and to control the villain, heal up damage that you take, and otherwise just keep things under control. I even threw in Starhawk because Starhawk's such a great ally, and he's a guardian, and you know, he was a guardian for a minute. So he's got his heroes for hire, his guardians, and then some other useful people. That's kind of the idea. So yeah, those are the decks that I put together for him. Kind of trying to give some different flavor, some different ideas of places you could go. Ant-Man is a character who can handle all aspects pretty well, and there's really more directions you could go with decks. If you could build a perfect defense deck because he has that base 3 defense that's good for that. Of course, there's all kinds of directions. You could take a leadership deck. Avengers Assemble is an option instead of kind of going for the giant people. I think base attack aggression is pretty much what a lot of people go for, but you know, we've got just efficient events here, and I'm sure he could do other focuses if he wanted to. And same thing with Justice. There's all kinds of things you could do with this, but I thought Float Like a Butterfly, Confused Villain, fun times. So anyways, if you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. If you want to see more of these, let me know, and hopefully I'll be able to put out more of them, start to figure out how to do this a little quicker, get into some sort of a rhythm for this eventually. Still working on it. So I'll see you next time.